Hello, everyone. Welcome to Chasing the Murder Talking News. Guys, take a moment to like and subscribe. Hit that notification bell if you would like notifications whenever we have new uploads. So, guys, here we go. We are on part 21 of Life Beyond the Grave. February 2nd, 2008. We learned that Lori Vallow is well, it seems to me, in my opinion, to be kind of coaxing Tylee into saying a few things. She has Tylee taking pictures of her father's bathroom, claiming that Joe Ryan, he has needles in there. There is meeting after meeting with people like Leslie Smith, Mary Fogel, the GAL, over concerns with Tylee Ryan. Now, these aren't just regular concerns. These are very serious concerns. Tylee saying things like, while blaming one of the people involved with investigating this case, of threatening to burn her and her family. And there's a lot of people that are very suspicious about those accusations. Those of us that have been following this case probably believe that this is something Lori made up in order to, get her way. We know how she works. And Joe Ryan, we don't know much about him. But we do know that he's fighting awfully hard for his daughter Tylee. And Lori's not making it easy. But it seems the harder he tries, the more difficult it is for him to spend time with his daughter. He doesn't get to see her much. So while behind the scenes, Lori Vallow, Joseph Ryan, and Tylee Ryan spending a lot of time behind closed doors speaking with professionals. Chad Daybell is back to working at the cemetery. So this is in 2008. He says there's a funeral happening at the cemetery he's working at. And then a cow just comes up and interrupts the funeral. Chad says in a blog and also one of his books that the crew has to try to persuade the cow off the property. But obviously, the cow is hard-headed. It wants to stay there. Chad says, I'll never forget, though, how badly the cow wouldn't take part in the funeral. Out of courtesy, I checked the background of the deceased lady to make sure that there wasn't some kind of strange cosmic connection between her and the cow. So remember that, guys, cosmic connection. So in 2008, Chad Daybell believes that most likely if you run across somebody, this isn't by chance. Most likely this is a cosmic connection. You are drawn to one another. And so this is what Chad is trying to say about this cow at the funeral. Maybe it's cosmically attached to the woman who just recently passed away. So where is he learning this from? Is this something he's learning through the Mormon doctrine or teachings on Sunday? Where does it come from? One thing's for certain. Chad is very secretive, but he does like to share some of his ideas that seem to be on the, bit of the crazy side for some people. And when he starts writing his books, his family start to kind of raise questions about who Chad Daybell really is. Did they ever really know him? Chad Daybell has a different way of thinking. He has strange ideas. And he's afraid to share them openly unless he can find someone like him. And if he does, I have learned that he'll go above and beyond sharing these strange ideas, or at least inquiring more about theirs. And I often wonder during my research, the people that he seeks out, the authors he publishes through his book company, Does he secretly admire them and basically just dress up their stories, their experiences, and adopt them as his own? So I've always wondered that, but that's just my idea and my speculation. One thing Chad will tell you, he is not very creative. And I always apply that to anything I ever learn with Chad Daybell. So where is Chad learning about this cosmic connection? You've always heard where people have said we're a match made in heaven, meaning they're destined to be together. This is something he felt about Tammy. And in the future, this is something he'll also attach to other people in his life. Destiny. How they're cosmically drawn throughout their lifetimes. So let's go over a few things that I want you to understand before we move forward, because a lot of this is based on spiritual pre-existence, pre-mortal life in the cosmos. There is so much information, guys, so I'm just going to skip, the birth of how the Mormons have adopted this belief system, and we will put a little bit, but not much. Okay, let's talk about Joseph Smith. Joseph Smith is the father of Mormonism. He was the one that created it, well, based off of something that existed years ago, but we won't go into that. One thing we do know is Joseph Smith did adopt cosmology into this work. According to Joseph Smith, there was a pre-existence or a pre-mortal life in which human spirits were literal children of heavenly parents. In Mormonism, the God, the Father, he goes by Elohim. Also with the Jehovah, which is the pre-mortal Jesus. And he had presented a plan of salvation. And in this plan, it included moral agency. And so this privilege of choice, which was introduced by God, the eternal Father of all his spirit children in the premortal state. And once you are born to be mortal, this is basically your test of faith. And also, the choices are the central to the plan of salvation and the Latter-day Saint teaching. So, this baby is born on earth, and then it's exposed to both good and evil. It's given free choice. It's given the opportunity to test to get back to God. So there are some choices you need to make in order to live this plan of salvation. Now, it is believed that Lucifer, also known as Satan or the devil, rebelled against this plan, which resulted in a war in heaven. When Lucifer objected to this plan, it's at that point that God casts Lucifer from the heavens and he becomes Satan. Church members of the LDS believe that all individuals have the ability to differentiate between good and evil, and that Satan and his followers are not able to tempt people beyond the point where they can resist. This means that you will be held responsible for your actions. And Chad Daybell, he is a supporter of, once you pass away, you will be judged by God based on the combination of one's faith and works. So you must understand that earth is a testing ground for those born to mortal state. So under this plan of salvation, God the Father, Jehovah, created the earth, Humanity is born, then tested, and then the resurrection. There are warning signs, especially if you look into the cosmos, that there is end days approaching. They are going to prepare for Zion. And after this resurrection, all men and women, except for the spirits that followed Lucifer, would be assigned one of the 3 degrees of glory. So the highest degree which we have learned is the celestial kingdom. And only the highest of the high, the best, those who test it without flaws, can become gods and goddesses through a process called exaltation or eternal progression. Chad is learning, if he lives this very lawful plan, that he can become a god. One of the LDS church leaders, Lorenzo Snow, says, quote, "As man now is, God once was. As God now is, man may be." End quote. The difference is between Mormonism and true Christianity, I say, and without it being offending anyone, but before Mormonism come along, is Mormons believe God himself was once mortal, just as Jesus was. So the reigning God once passed through mortality, and that this God lived on the planet with his own higher God. Now, in your pre-mortal life, and if I used wrong terminology, excuse me, guys, I can't get everything perfect because there's so much to learn. I want you guys to know that these pre-mortal spirits, they're on other planets scattered throughout the universe or even multi-universes. These pre-mortal spirits are known as spirit intelligence that existed before the God, the Father, and the Heavenly Mother created spiritual bodies for them. And these self-existing intelligences were organized into individual spirit beings. And this is done or organized or orchestrated by the heavenly parents themselves. And so from there, they become the begotten sons and daughters of God. Interestingly, there really isn't any information on the procreative process whereby or how the intelligence became spirits or come to be mortal. I mean, we have an idea, but we don't know exactly how these spirits are created. They say that spirit bodies are composed of matter. They are described as being more fine or pure than the regular matter. And a reminder, guys, remember the firstborn spirit of all time was the child of God, the Father, who is referred to Jehovah, whom Latter-day Saints identify as the premortal Jesus. However, he did not have this immortal physical body like a God, the Father at least, until his resurrection. So it's important to know that heaven is very well organized. In fact, in the Latter-day Saints religion, they say that God, the Father's plan for all his children was to provide a way for them to become more like him. So, although these pre-mortals were all happy living in heaven with God the Father, the spirits, or God's spirit children, could not experience the fullness of joy, enjoyed by him, unless their spirit bodies were joined with a physical body. So you have a purpose when you're born as a mortal. Now, God himself convened a grand council of all his children to propose a plan of progression. So it's all about you being born to earth, and you have to demonstrate through free will the desire to choose righteousness rather than evil, which Chad doesn't understand. He fails at from the beginning of his. So you will learn that people attached to the story, like Chad Daybell, Julie Rowe, and several others, they don't believe in just that they live one life. In fact, they believe that they live multiple lives. So they've been existing multiple times as multiple personas. And one thing that God says, as a spirit child, you will have no memory of pre-earth life, much less multiple lives that you've lived. But in the future, Chad Daybell is going to claim that he does know and he has memories of his pre-existence, his pre-mortal lives, his spirit life, etc. I mean, he just has a special gift that no one else has, though it's already been said in their doctrine that all memories are erased and that no one will remember. So for those of that are saying that they're going to heaven or they're speaking with angels, their near-death experiences, they're given these special messages, it's insane, because this is a law and the doctrine by God saying that this is done for a purpose, and so therefore no one will be able to ever know their past life experiences nor their spiritual experiences in the past. Now, remember, Lucifer has been cast out of heaven. He is not a supporter of God's plan. And so this is creating unrest and war. Lucifer wanted basically supreme obedience. And God wanted people to be able to make their own choices. Remember, Lucifer was a chosen savior, one of God's spirit children. Remember, Chad believed that God gave him signs, and he sees visions of people that's supposed to be in his life. That includes his wife Tammy, if you remember back in the early part of the story at least, that he had a vision that he'll meet this woman, and this to him happened. According to Chad, Tammy Daybell is his soulmate. They are meant to be together. And together they have built quite a big family. Now remember, Joseph Smith, the founder of Mormonism, includes a number of details concerning the nature of light, elements, matter, and spirit matter, and also intelligence. According to Mormon scripture, the elements are eternal, meaning that the elements coexist with God. So they may be organized or reorganized, but not destroyed. So very familiar to the laws of physics attached to atoms. But Joseph Smith teaches that they didn't have a beginning, so there is no end. Brigham Young even said, God never made something out of nothing. It is not the economy or law of which the worlds were, are, or will exist. So in other words, Mormons believe that everything within the universe is all done by the hands of God. He created, he organized, and he did this out of pre-existing elements. Along with physical matter, Mormons also believe that the spirit intelligences have existed or coexisted with God, and this is since the beginning of time. According to Wiki, Mormons believe in a universe and a God governed by physical law in which all miracles, including acts of God, have a natural explanation, though science does not yet have the tools or means necessary to explain them. While we're reading, their idea, the elements and that sort of thing, and how they work within the Mormon world, We don't hear anything about an individual being able to control elements such as wind. While God does have prophets, people who follow him and obey him, not many of them are given special powers in order to tell about their pre-existence, their pre-lives, or others. So moving you a little bit a different direction. We're learning that Chad Daybell, he has a lot of wants, and he has a lot of what I want to say is cravings. Seems to me that Chad's having a lot of, very hard time resisting the candy offered by the stranger. But I'm also noticing around this time, a lot of Mormons are creating Mormon businesses and trying to profit off of people who are supporters of that religion. The sad part is when you start feeding something like this, it grows into a monster that can never be contained. The Mormon doctrine is there. It's free for all. But that's not enough for some people. Some people believe there's greater messages out there. There are special people who are closer to God than they are, and they will pay to be close to them. Chad Daybell and his visionary gifts began to grow. He becomes more confident in writing down his predictions in his book. While Chad is working part-time in the cemetery as a maintenance worker, he's brewing up new ideas for new books. So documents say, and it's hard to pin down all this, guys, in order for me because I'm researching so much. Tylee Ryan, she's going through a stressful situation, but there's times in documents where they say Tylee seems happy and wants to continue visits with her fathers, while other times she was in a hospital and a treatment involving stress due to continued separation of her parents. And professionals are becoming very, very concerned with Lori's misrepresented information regarding Tylee's intake. So 2008, we are learning that there's a possibility that Lori is lying and manipulating in order to get her way. According to friends and family, Lori has always wanted to be close with God and set good examples. She wants to be a great mother figure. And on the outside, everyone seems to think that's what she is. She's a great parent. But behind closed doors, the children are given signs that this is not the case. In fact, it's almost like torture for these children, in my opinion, based on my research. So at one point, we know that Tylee Ryan is speaking to Dr. Wilcox. And at one point, during the summer of 2008, and according to documents, she tells him that her dad, Joseph Ryan, had abused her sexually when she was 4. So this is several years after they've been divorced, which, according to Colby, was the reason they separated in the first place. So that doesn't make sense. What I don't understand is the documents aren't that great, guys. But Dr. Wilcox asked Tylee if she's ever alone with her father, and she says, no, this happened when she was a year old. More documents come out, and it says that Joseph Ryan hadn't seen her father in months. While Lori Vallow is still going through this custody battle with Joseph Ryan over Tylee Ryan, there's nothing really going on with Charles that we can find in this time other than a few emails. So Tylee Ryan's guardian ad litem, they're trying to figure out what's going on. Lots of meetings, but really this case is so bizarre to them and so much going on that many of them are continuously distracted with accusations that they have to investigate. And Mary Fogel is really trying hard to figure out what's going on, but she really doesn't figure it out. In August of 2008, Chad Daybell loses his grandfather. This is quite devastating to him. And in a September 11, 2015 blog, He wrote, "Today is Patriots' Day, and I want to share a story of a great patriot in my life. My full name is Chad Guy Daybell. My middle name comes from my mother's father, Guy Chestnut. I bear that name proudly because his righteous life has influenced his prosperity for generations. Life didn't start out easily for him. He was born in 1923 to Alma and Amara Chestnut in a tiny town in Teasdale, Utah. He weighed 13 pounds at birth. 3 weeks later, Amara passed away, and suddenly Alma was a single father with 6 children. So remember, guys, when he's referring to Alma, he's referring to Guy Chestnut, his grandfather, and also you notice that they are named after biblical characters within the Mormon belief system anyways. The Euler family heard about Alma's predicament and asked if they could take in the motherless newborn. The Eulers were converts to the LDS Church and lived in Fruta, which is now beside Capitol Reef National Park. Their homestead is gone, but it was at the base of the stone cliff that contains Native American petroglyphs and is a popular tourist spot. There's a sign that reads, Euler's Place, at the location. Guy attended a small one-room schoolhouse that was along Highway 24. There's a recorded message from a former school teacher that mentions a student who put a snake in her desk drawer, giving her a good scare. That was him. Chad Daybell writes, he's very excited about that. So it seems that the Euler actually took in the chestnut baby. So anyways, they say that, he says, he worked hard for the Euler farm and became a key part of their family. He even took their last name and was known as Guy Euler. When Chestnut reached the 9th grade, he left the small school in Fruta and began attending the school at Wayne High, which is in Bignell. One day, a gym teacher brought a man who had been a professional boxer to teach the boys to defend themselves. After demonstrating a few techniques, the boxer selected Guy to be his opponent. As they began circling each other, Guy faked with his left hand and knocked the boxer to the ground with a solid right hand punch to the face. That quickly ended the day's boxing demonstration. Guy made the varsity basketball team his junior year, but as the team began its preseason schedule, Guy became very ill. He woke up one day and discovered that he was paralyzed from the waist down. The doctor diagnosed the illness as polio, and Guy was told that he would never walk again. Through faith, prayers, and determination, he was on his feet in 3 months. He was using crutches at first, but he soon discarded them. During this time, Guy became acquainted with a pretty dark-haired girl named Flora Chappelle. They were married in 1943. World War II was raging, and 4 days after their marriage, Guy departed for 8 weeks of Navy boot camp. He served on the USS Pocomoke, where he served as a medical corpsman. Eventually, we find out that Chad's grandfather actually is no longer with the Navy. He returned safely home, and he works a variety of jobs. He owned his own long-haul truck, but eventually started painting houses so that he could be home. Now, something you will notice with Chad Daybell, sports is very important to him. Not only that, but developing skills and becoming a leader within the church and other organizations. This is something that is consistent. This is something he really craves. to be a leader within the church. And his interest is also in his history of, well, his family history of their part and what their parts within the leadership of the church are. So I wanted to share that with you guys, that I noticed that leadership skills, and no matter what it is important to Chad. He says his grandfather developed these skills after, leaving the Navy. He became a leader in the industry, and he was known for his honesty and hard work. He later expanded his operation and began building homes. And here, this is sort of important. He says, a key turning point in Grandpa's spiritual life came in the late 1940s during a visit to the Manti Temple. This account comes from my grandparents' personal history, which is written in third person. As Guy and Flora were walking in the main hallway of the temple, a man approached who they had never met. The man stepped in front of Guy and asked, "Who's your father?" "Al Chestnut," Guy replied. Then this other guy says, "I've seen your father," the man said. "You look like him." The man then smiled and asked, "Have you done your genealogy?" He says, "No, I've had a hard time tracing my father's line." The man nodded. He says, "I know who can help you." The stranger then named a man in Helper, Utah. And this guy in Helper, Utah would have the records that Guy would need. Flora searched through her purse and for something to write down and write the name on. So this is important, guys. According to this, Guy was going to help her find something in her purse to write down this guy's name. And when they looked back, the guy just disappeared out of nowhere. And Chad says that his grandfather's rushing to the doorways trying to locate this person, but he can't find him. Then he talks about how the guy dressed. He dressed in a typical suit and didn't appear any different than any other man. But it seemed that perhaps this was some kind of special messenger, and that Guy had actually considered himself an oiler, the people that had raised him. Guy contacted the man and Helper, and he found out a great deal of information on his ancestors. Guy and Flora were able to do the temple work for dozens of Guy's relatives. And without this person helping Guy, he said, Guy might have never completed the temple work for his Chestnut ancestors. It's important to keep this, what I'm going to share with you right now, that Chad shared in a vlog. This is one of the things that actually affects him in a way that actually promotes his future ideas and thought process. So here we go. When I was a teenager, when Grandpa first told me this experience, and it really had an impact on me. Up to that point, I figured only the prophet or apostles could receive visits from messengers. But I realized it could happen to common members of the church under the right circumstances. So it's in his teen years that he's realizing that he too can communicate with the greater, I don't know how to say this, deities and messengers from that home within the celestial kingdom. He continues with, Grandpa was the father of 5 daughters who all reached teenagehood in the 1960s. He endured it well, and that alone should assure him direct admission to the celestial kingdom. Chad mentions that all those daughters got married basically one after another, and they played a huge role in helping his parents establish a happy marriages. So from that point on, this one orphan child or adopted child has many children and now has a growing group of grandchildren. And Chad says that Guy was able to make each and every one of those grandchildren feel special. Well, Chad is slowly losing his book publishing company. He realizes that he's suddenly working about 50 hours a week at the cemetery. He's clearing snow and digging graves. He says in another blog, in retrospect, both Tammy and I were shocked at how quickly things had fallen apart. I was ready to put the whole publishing industry in the rearview mirror. We had felt so guided and inspired to start the company, and then 4 years later, we're done. I had written 3 volumes of my Standing in Holy Places series by this time, and I was about ready to call it quits on the project too. However, our cemetery secretary, Marty Warren, read my books and became a great support to me. Whenever I would take the cemetery paperwork to her in the city offices, she would say, "When is that next book coming out?" Or, "I need more books. I gave them to my friends to read." She really was a great motivator. So I would go home at night and make some progress on the books, eventually finishing the series. And as I mentioned before, the attention he's getting from these books, that's his motivator. Not that he's making a difference in somebody's life. He's also communicating with a lot of women. At least it seems so based on the research that I've done. I know there's a ton more that I've not been able to learn about. At this point, Chad's visions begin to grow stronger day by day. He sees himself as a leader for the LDS. But again, Chad is learning no matter how hard he tries to become one of the church's higher authority or members, the more he realizes it isn't going to happen. Based off the research so far, Chad seems to be doubting in the leaders of the church and doubting that they're true leaders. Furthermore, he believes that they're not able to envision the true future and the soon coming or second coming of Jesus Christ. Around this time, Chad believed that it's time to start preparing for that second coming. So the first step is to prepare Zion. But something I noticed that a lot of people who are attached to Chad later on, they all believe that the church leaders are not where they believe church leaders should be when it comes to the second coming and Zion. Chad doesn't immediately say these kinds of things. In fact, he just starts writing his feelings into these books. And that series, Standing in Holy Places, is the very beginning. It also suggests, in some ways, I believe, that Chad Daybell is a special messenger sent from the higher powers. So at first, Chad Daybell treads lightly. He begins to search for people more like him, or people who will follow him, or at least follow his lead. He needs them to send messages. And I truly believe, based on my research, that at this time, he's preparing to build his throne. And as time moves forward, Chad will tell people that really he has the support of the LDS leaders. But in truth, it doesn't seem that the support that he's getting from the LDS leaders is the ones that he's pushing. So the propaganda he's pushing, the agenda he's pushing to these people he's speaking to behind closed doors. It seems that Chad knows that he's laying a false foundation and building thin stick small cities while advertising castles and Disneyland. And the most interesting to me is Chad has a vision he never really tells anyone about. It includes him ruling a land he built to run it as his own community. So it would be his laws, his people, and his kingdom. Zion is supposed to be something that's built around the second coming of Jesus Christ, a true king. But in Chad's true vision, he knows the center of this community sits in his home, surrounded by tents. People have given up everything to be with him and believe in everything that he has predicted that is to come or has come. Building Zion, the church of the firstborn. This is something that he really, this drives him. But it's not just for him. It's also about his children. Many of Chad's visions always include his children. All right, so we're going to end part 22 here, and I'll work on part 23 next week. I want you to look at these faces real quick before we close out. These guys are still missing. Please share their story. Thank you so much, everyone, for liking and commenting, subscribing. Please, if you haven't subscribed, do so now. Love you guys, and I'll see you guys soon.